Hi, my name is Evan O'Connor, and my project is about the impacts of OPEC. OPEC is an agency that represents a group of oil-producing countries that currently produce over 30% of the world's oil. The goal of these countries is to work together to ensure stability in the oil market. Ideally, the organization benefits all involved. Western countries have a long history of looking at oil-producing states as property to divide up and protect, dating back to pre-World War II. The oil-producing states got together in 1960 in an effort to better represent themselves in the world stage. The first time OPEC really showcased its power over the market was in 1973 when they decreased production and raised oil prices. These high prices spurred the first green energy movement in the US. Solar panels were installed on the White House in the 70s. Currently, the US is the largest oil producer, but the oil is owned and produced by many companies, and each makes their own pricing decisions within the US market. OPEC, on the other hand, represents the single largest block of oil producers, and everyone watches what they do when they set a price due to the effect on the market. Oil production impacts every aspect of our modern lives, and even more so impacts the people's lives who live in OPEC-membered countries. In his book, Peter Marsh describes the complexity of understanding the impact of oil on a nation. When oil is discovered in a country, it can be either a blessing or a curse. The biggest deciding factor is how the government handles the resource and the revenue from the resource. When a country gains income from oil, it can end up leading to problems. If they rely on that income and allow other industries to fade away in importance, it can lead to long-term instability. Some countries have been successful at balancing the money to support people, but many have not. Oftentimes, the US will get involved in these failed states to maintain stability, protect the resource, and for humanitarian reasons. Within OPEC, it is clear that a few nations have used the funds they've gained through oil revenue to invest in the nation, while many have not. Equatorial Guinea is a country where the GDP is among the top 30 in the world due to oil revenue, but it has some of the highest income inequality in the world as well. The vast majority of the country lives in extreme poverty, while the top 1% controls 95% of the wealth. Developing countries work with oil companies to maintain the oil found within their borders and distribute it worldwide, and each country works as an independent deal with companies. The common people in these countries are usually not considered by the corrupt governments that are overseeing this oil revenue. Gabon has done better than some of the other small developing nations in OPEC, but an autocratic and corrupt government in control means that the country does not completely utilize the resources to the fullest, and there is still massive income inequality. The US has a long and contentious history with Iran. They are constantly near the top of the list of dangerous nations on the planet. Many developing nations take over from Western companies after an initial period of oil production. While the companies must comply with environmental standards, watchdog groups, and shareholders, the countries usually do not. Often, state-run oil facilities are the worst to the environment, like in Ecuador. The facilities have displaced native people and polluted the environment without great benefit to Ecuador's economy. As one of the founding members in 1960, you'd expect this country with huge oil reserves to be very rich, such as Qatar or Saudi Arabia. But poor governance has brought it to the brink of societal and economic collapse. Iraq and Libya are countries whose government has been overthrown or replaced violently, and the production of oil fluctuates whenever those changes occur. Angola is a very wealthy country due to its oil reserves. It has a very oppressive government and experiences corruption issues as well as major wealth inequality. Nigeria has vast oil reserves, but poor governance has led to an extremely poor population. Algeria, like many OPEC nations, depend heavily on oil revenue. As oil prices drop, income is lost and governments cannot keep the population happy. Kuwait is one of the few nations that have been able to turn their oil revenue into better living for the majority of the population, but socially they still have very repressive norms. The United Arab Emirates have also been able to provide a better life through oil revenue, but face similar issues as Kuwait. Saudi Arabia is the most prominent OPEC member and is the largest producer in the group, but has also raised the standard of living through oil. Qatar was a prominent OPEC member but has since left. This action and other differences have led the other Arab nations part of OPEC to cut off Qatar. OPEC recently has reached out to Russia and Mexico to help offset the low price of oil coming from US fracking. While OPEC is a powerful force in the market, sometimes other things have more precedent. The coronavirus shutdown has drastically cut demand and lowered prices for oil production. Places to store the extra oil are at capacity now. Environmentally good, economically bad. We all know about the negative environmental impact that oil has, and it's easy to blame petroleum producing countries and companies for this impact. But we all use the oil for products, transport, energy, and heat. There are many views about the impact of OPEC. They all agree on the influence these countries have, but disagree on what that impact means for the rest of the world. While lowering our dependence on foreign oil seems like a straightforward benefit for the US, it is possible that we weaken OPEC in doing that. Many of these countries, while in bad shape now, would be far worse off without the coordination of the entire group. As part of my research, I was able to have a Zoom meeting with an oil executive whose division is involved in predicting trends in the oil market. We spoke for 30 minutes and he helped me cement my thoughts on OPEC. In the United States, we would actively break up any group that tried to fix prices for a commodity due to our antitrust laws. We believe in free markets. OPEC could not exist in our system. Instead of companies setting prices together, it is nations. These nations have benefited from their cooperative agreement. Without the coordination, oil prices would be more unstable, some of these countries would lose bargaining power, and the corruption and lawlessness could be even worse. Having a governing council with at least some nations that are stable seems to keep countries from complete chaos. We, the US, have no say over OPEC and don't really deal directly with them as an organization often, but we watch what they decide to do because it influences everything. Oil money does not need to bring lawlessness and corruption. The corruption exists and the oil money feeds it. Some nations have been able to use the oil money to diversify and invest in things like solar power in Saudi Arabia or public health and education in Norway. Stable and honest governments can use oil money to transition to a new economy. We just need to find ways to encourage them to solve pressing environmental, economic, and cultural issues. Just as many energy companies are using oil profits to fund research and development in green technology, we can hope a group like OPEC can see the change coming and move their countries away from dependency on oil revenues.